Aloha. Today's episode is brought to you by the University of Hawaii, College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, and the Livestock Extension Group.
Aloha, welcome everyone to the Livestock Walaʻau, a podcast aimed to provide educational support, information, guidance, and outreach to our livestock stakeholders in Hawaii. We are your hosts, Mele Oshiro and
Shannon Sand.
And today we are going to be talking with Dr. Dillon Feuz, who comes from Utah State University, where he is a professor in applied economics department. And his primary research and extension focuses in the livestock marketing and risk management area. So he's going to be talking about some of his decision-making tools that he's created and some of his programs and background information, I guess. So I'm going to hand it over to Dillon. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, and aloha, everyone. I've learned a few Hawaiian words in my 3 months on the island. It's been great, and I've been able to get out and talk with a few producers and learn a few things and see some good cattle.
Yeah.
It's always, I've told some other people that to me, the best sight in the world is black cows on green pasture.
Yeah.
So I hope I
Yeah.
didn't offend those of you that got white cows or red cows, but for me, black cows on green pasture is that's a great sight.
Yeah.
And,
I think that's my background, so you're fine, I guess.
Yeah, that's in your background there, Shannon.
Yeah, well, Mele took the picture, so if people are mad at that, then that's
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's been great to be here. You know, I put in for a sabbatical to come to Hawaii. I wanted to learn about the Hawaii industry. And I've been an administrator for the last 9 years, and I'd kind of gotten out of some of my
Nice.
extension work. And I knew that there was some software out there that would allow me to do some things that I hadn't done before.
Mhm.
And so I was wanting to get some practice doing that. And so I came here to learn about this industry and to figure out how to maybe help create some online software
Mhm.
tools that could help Hawaii producers
Yeah.
make some management decisions. And so that's what I've spent the last 3 months doing, is just kind of understanding the industry, understanding the challenges here,
Mhm.
and then seeing if I can model those in a manner that can help producers make some real-time decisions. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
Nice.
that's great. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Shannon. I'm sorry. Do you have something?
No, I just was saying that's nice.
Yeah, and it's been great. We've all been in the project with Dillon, along with Mark Thorne. So it's been good. It's been challenging because of COVID puts a stick in a lot of things that we're not able to actually have, like a lot of in-person stuff that we'd like to be able to do. But yeah, so you want to talk a little bit more then about this sabbatical, exactly what is sabbatical. I don't know if everybody really knows what a sabbatical is. I
Right.
really didn't know until I came into this position. So maybe we talk a little bit about what that is and what exactly have you been doing here in Hawaii and some of the project?
yeah, sure. I guess some of my family and even colleagues back on the mainland in Utah, they think my sabbatical is hanging out on the beaches of Hawaii, which
I
certainly
think a
I've
lot
had
of people
opportunities
think
to
that's
do that.
Hawaii in general. Even if you work here, it's like I go to work like every day, like everybody else. It's just
Yes.
here.
Yes, but in general, sabbaticals are
Yeah.
set up. Universities have them. I think there are some private businesses that
Oh,
encourage their people to take sabbaticals, and generally it's to kind of give you a break from what you've been doing. But
mhm.
as much as anything, you're hoping to go somewhere where you can learn something new that then you can bring back to your own. And sometimes that's new cultural ways of doing things. Sometimes
Mhm.
that's new environmental challenges. Just people look at things differently, and lots of times we get in our own bubbles,
Right.
and we're only just talking to our close neighbors.
Mhm.
And there's a joke in marketing and I do a lot with the futures markets.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, the futures markets are based in Chicago. And so the joke is, if it's raining in Chicago, then corn futures will be down because all the traders think that it's raining
Raining
everywhere. So there's
everywhere.
going to be a big corn crop. Well, there could be a drought going on in Iowa and Nebraska, but if it's raining in Chicago, it must be raining everywhere.
Yeah.
And, lots of times we get in those bubbles. And so to me, a sabbatical helps you break out of that bubble, helps you interact with a wider clientele group, more colleagues. And so that's what I wanted. I've known about Hawaii cattle industry, just kind of, I know Hawaii has cattle, but I've never been here, and I've visited the islands before strictly as a tourist primarily, but I wanted to come, really understand what some of the challenges are here. And then, so my sabbatical lasts for 1 year. And so during that time, I'm not really doing work for Utah State University. I am doing work for University of Hawaii Extension.
Right.
And so for me during that time, anything I can do that can help Hawaii producers, well, then that's what I want to do. And so I'll talk about some of the specific things I'm doing, but towards the end, we're going to throw out, some teasers. If there's something that you would like me to do, I still have 7 months to go in this sabbatical. So I have lots of time to work on stuff. So if I talk about what I'm doing and you're saying, well, that's not what we really need, here's what we need, then we'll tell you how you can let us know.
Yeah. And I think that's important, right? Because Shannon and I always talk about this learning from our neighbors. And I think a lot of us don't know maybe that we're going through the same problems or having the same issues or know somebody, right, that went through something. So that's, I think, really important of stepping outside of your bubble, understanding and, being able to be open to look at different things that are going on and relate back to other industries. And, it's the industry here is different. In a lot of ways and similar in a lot of ways. So I really think it's a big value to have somebody come, from working in other markets and in other areas. It's very important to put that information into Hawaii and kind of look back at what we can and add in. And improve. So very, very, very good. So
so I was thinking, in fact, I was talking with somebody, I don't remember who, the other day. So I grew up on cattle ranches in Wyoming, a couple different ones. Well, on the mainland, Wyoming is really quite isolated from what I would call mainland beef cattle industry. I mean, it's, there are cattle ranches in Wyoming, but you're a long way from any major markets. And I remember as a young boy listening to my father and grandfather talk, and there was a mistrust. Like if you sent your cattle to Nebraska or Kansas or heaven forbid, Texas to get fed, you didn't trust those people. Yeah. And I was having this conversation with a small cattle producer here on the Big Island. And he was talking about how his father had sent some cattle to, I don't remember now if it was Washington or California to be fed. And it ended up costing them rather than making money. And so there was a mistrust there because they just didn't know anybody. Well, for 10 years in my career, I worked in Nebraska. And in Nebraska, the cow-calf guy is neighbors with the feedlot guy. And so they're sharing coffee in the morning, or they're cheering on their same kids at the high school volleyball game or basketball game, whatever. And so they know each other. Yeah. And so the markets actually work better there because there's that trust build up. And so I think that's one of the challenges that Hawaii producers face is there are more opportunities on the mainland for their cattle, but trying to establish those kind of relationships where you could
it's hard.
Have a partner there that you can trust. And I know there's a co-op on the island that some of the producers are part of that tries to establish some of those relationships. Yeah. But that's one of the challenges. And that's one of the things I'm trying to model is, okay, what's the price I can receive for my calves today in Hawaii versus if I knew somebody on the mainland, what's the cost of shipping to get them there? And then what would be the potential profit in terms of feeding them for, and I know the co-op, I think, takes most of the calves clear to a slaughter weight.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't necessarily have to be the model that that a producer could follow. They could just send them and have somebody feed them for 60 days on pasture and then sell them in an auction market. But how do you build up those relationships and trust? I mean, I can model it, but establishing those relationships will be the difficult things.
Yeah, you still have to have that outreach from those producers to certain contacts and whatnot. Yeah, so
it's hard.
Yeah, that's sometimes the difficult thing, I think.
But I've been amazed at, just as I've got to know people and obviously most of you on this listening to this podcast wouldn't know, but I've been living in Waimea, and so I get out and talk with people, and it amazes me. It seems like everybody has a family member. Of course, I've also come to understand in the Hawaiian culture, anybody older than you is your aunt or uncle, and anybody your age is your cousin. But some of them tell me they really do have cousins or aunts or uncles or siblings on the mainland somewhere. And so sometimes I think maybe using one of those relatives to help establish some relationship with somebody where you can build up that trust, and where maybe your family member can just go verify, oh yeah, cattle, they're on feed in that feed lot, or they're out on pasture there, they look good. Just reduces that uncertainty, that risk. We're all about risk management. Well, human risk, human uncertainty is a big one.
Yeah. And I think too, just understanding too what the markets there, the buyers there want, right, as well as the animals, and what's going conditions of what your animals should be going into those feeders and what they kind of look for. That's the important thing, information to understand and whatnot, to build on top of those relationships as well. But wow. So you talked more too, I would take a step back, because you talk about your sabbatical research and you did a lot of digging into what's going on here in Hawaii and our cattle markets and producers here. So then you took that now, what you're going to do. Can you talk a little bit more about what you're doing with that information that you gathered from here?
Sure. So what I'm trying to do is, it appears to me that, especially for the smaller producers who are primarily just selling their cattle to a broker here, there is limited ability to know ahead of time what that price may be. It's kind of when they're ready to take their 10 head, 20 head, 50 head, sell it, the broker says, okay, I'll pay you 90 cents a pound today for your steers and 80 cents for your heifers. And it's kind of a take it or leave it market. And then I talked to somebody else, and, one person told me they got 90 cents and somebody else told me they got 70 cents. Well, was there a reason that one got 90 and one got 70? And I've studied a lot on markets on the mainland, and we have reported data, auction reported data. So even in an auction that it's occurring today on the mainland, cattle that are delivered that same day, there could be that much spread in the prices that those cattle are receiving based on quality of the cattle. Sometimes it's, if your cattle had to get transported longer and they're shrunk, the buyer will recognize that he's actually buying more animal than what he's paying for weight. And so he'll pay a higher price per pound as compared to somebody who got their cattle there a couple of days early. They fatten them up on hay and water, and the buyer recognizes, oh, this animal is tanked up. And so they'll pay less per pound. So those games get played, and you can have a wide market spread. So just because somebody gets 90 cents and somebody else gets 80 cents for what appears to be the same animal doesn't necessarily mean the market's not right. But it could also mean that somebody got less because a buyer was taking advantage of somebody that didn't know the market as well. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do on the markets, so there's a feeder cattle market on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the futures market, and that has hundreds, if not thousands, of people trading that market on a regular basis. And so the information that's out in the market in terms of what's the price of corn, what's the price of hay, what's the price of those animals going to be when they're slaughtered, that information is known in the marketplace, and people try to get all that information and then make their best guess for what that feeder ought to be worth. So then that's in Chicago. Well, then local markets tend to reflect that. So if that market goes up a couple dollars, you would expect your local market to go up as well. It may not go up $2, maybe it'll only go up $1, or maybe because your conditions are such, it may go up $3. But I try to model that risk. Well, one of the challenges I've modeled that risk for Washington because there's good auction price data in Washington state. California doesn't have as good a market information, so I'm limited there. Texas has good information, and I know a lot of people send cattle there. So I've modeled that for Washington and Texas. Well, one of the challenges in Hawaii is there's not publicly available price data. And so every time I talk to a producer, I ask them, what'd you get for your calves the last time you sold them? And so I'm trying to build a database so that I can see, okay, how do the prices here compare to, say, Washington state prices, and how do they compare to that Chicago price?
Right.
And are they fairly consistent? In other words, are they moving up and down at the same level? Or is the price here just staying flat and letting the mainland prices vary? So the more I can understand that, then I think the more I can help producers understand their situation here, help them. To me, risk isn't all bad. Sometimes risk provides us a profit potential, but we have to be able to anticipate, manage it,
justify that risk.
That's one of the things I'm working on, is just trying to understand that market risk locally.
And locally, that's hard. We don't have auctions, prices here. That doesn't occur here in Hawaii. So, so that was, I guess, one of the things that you presented at HCC and talked a bit about the project and your need to help gather. So do you think you have gathered enough data from our producers to understand this price range, or is you need still want to gather more?
Oh, I could absolutely use more data. I mean, I have, I only have a few observations. I've got some general data and kind of some annual price data that I can look at over like the last 20 years that would help me know in general, has the price level in Hawaii changed relative to the mainland in that time. And given the prices of fuel and transportation, I'd kind of expect that it would have changed. But in terms of looking at that more local variability, I could use much more data. I mean, we've contemplated sending out some kind of survey instrument. Haven't done that yet. And I hope if we do that and you receive it, that you'll try to respond.
We promise to make it really, really short if we do that.
Yes. It'll just be a couple questions. Did you sell cattle in the last 6 months or year? And what weight and price were they? And because I don't need your name, I don't want your name. I just need to know different prices that occurred, and then I'll compare those prices with prices from, say, Washington State or Texas, or with that Chicago Mercantile Exchange.
So you can create like an accurate decision-making tool for here that would be geared specifically for Hawaii, which would ideally help a lot of producers, hopefully long-term, Yeah.
And then if you can understand your price and just a little bit, it almost looks to me like there could be some seasonal differences where prices in Hawaii are closer to the mainland price in certain times of the year and are further from the mainland price in other times of the year. Well, if you knew that, then maybe it helps you to say, oh, I'm going to try to adjust my calving season a little bit so that I get more of my calves into that relatively higher market and fewer of them into that relatively lower market.
Lower. Yeah.
That would be the data that I would love to get enough of. So, because what I really don't want to do is make a tool and say, here's the market, and find out I had too few of observations and I just made a big error, and I'm encouraging you to do something that's not right.
Yeah.
So that's more data certainly could help that.
Yeah, for sure. That's the one thing. The more that we just were talking about, that data is power, and that's how we make decisions on a lot of things, especially when we're looking for grant funding or any decision tool that you want to create. You need to have that data to kind of back up and make sure you
justify.
Making
justify and show needs for resources or creation.
It's beneficial here in Hawaii because we can have a year-round, or we do have a year-round growing season, so we don't have, we do have certain parts of the year that our forage production isn't as good as others, not as productive, but still we can produce animals. We don't have we don't have cold winters, in the States. So for folks to be able to adjust those breeding seasons, and to benefit themselves in the other end of the market, I think that's a very good and useful tool that you'd like to encourage. So being said, if you guys are, if you're producers out there that are listening to this, that do send out cattle, and you have not had a chance to talk with Dillon, and you'd like to, reach out to Shannon and I through the podcast. We can connect you guys, or if you have data that you'd like to share, reach out to the podcast. Most of y'all have our emails and whatnot, or can reach us through CTAHR. So definitely that would be a very helpful resource. And with producer data and producers and whatnot, we always talk about, I guess that's the producer data is what we really need, right? Is to request more for that. I guess, when do you make the decision then, if we want to do a survey or not?
Well, I think we definitely want to do a survey, and we just need to carve out some time. It'll probably be after the first year that we get it sent out, but I think we'll send one out and try to get some more data.
Right.
And the other thing that I would like a little bit on, I know I think there's a hope anyway that with the new ownership of and I'll probably say this wrong, the
Poilo slaughter,
the Poilo slaughter facility. I think they're trying to expand the capacity a little, and some of you may be encouraged to keep some of your calves rather than sending them to the mainland or selling them to a broker. Maybe you keep some and feed them out yourself. And I would be interested kind of in what you think your cost of doing that is. I think there's usually a little bit of mineral and salt,
right?
Some fencing that has to be done. And I was talking with somebody where I grew up, where our cattle ran in the winter. In the winter, there was 2 or 3 feet of snow on the fences. And so in the spring, as the snow would melt, it'd break those fences. So every year there was a fencing cost involved before you could turn your cattle out on the pastures to graze in the summer. Well, that doesn't occur here, but then I heard that the vog is
I was gonna say not even just that, but rain in general, it'll eat it. And if you're close to the ocean, the salt will eat the fence.
So everybody has their challenges and different costs. So if I could learn those a little better, then as I'm modeling that, because one of the things I'm working with Mark Thorne on is he has years of pasture research. And so we're trying to come up with, okay, what is they've kind of narrowed down what they think works in terms of a moderate intensity
grazing and
stalking and some rotational grazing. But what are the costs involved in that? How much are you going to pay for salt and mineral? How much are you going to pay? Even kind of labor, how often do you have to go out and check those cattle? So any of that kind of data that I can gather, then as I build that decision tool of, all right,
Mhm.
am I better off running 50 cows and calves, or should I run 40 cows and calves and keep 20 of those calves back to go ahead and feed out and sell to the local plant
Right.
instead of selling them? Because that's another way to deal with risk, is to
Right.
have a couple different enterprises,
Right.
if you will,
Exactly.
and sell some of them to your broker,
Yeah.
sell some locally to
Right.
the packing plant. And I've also come to realize in Hawaii, there's quite a little, I wouldn't call it a black market, but it's a entrepreneurial, I'll sell to you, you're my neighbor.
Yeah.
Cash market.
You need a beef. Let's figure out how to butcher that beef. And
Yeah.
and sometimes it's not even a cash price. It's a trade for
Trade.
something else.
Services.
And,
Yeah.
and that's
something,
great.
yeah.
But those are all opportunities.
Yeah.
And need to be looked at.
Yeah, because there's still value in that. Even though you're trading it off for something else, you're still getting something in value for it.
Yeah,
so
of course.
It definitely needs to be considered and counted in. Yeah. That's quite a
It's probably
something.
like I have a mini feedlot in my own backyard. I can feed up to like 3 or 4 steers, and I'm
Nice.
partial. I know everybody here likes the grass-fed beef, but having lived in Nebraska for several years, I'm partial to corn-fed beef.
Grain.
So
Yeah.
I feed my steers lots of corn and grain, but at the end of the day, my operation isn't very profitable because I end up, if I'm losing money, I don't recoup that. If I'm making money, I don't charge it to my children or my in-laws when I'm, quote, selling them the beef.
That sounds like my dad, to be
I think
honest,
there's some
because
of that
like
that
we
goes
have a
around.
small, a section where we
Yeah.
feed out at the house.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And well, here too, we've just gotten used to grass fed. I think it's always been from when I was younger as well. But just the cost of bringing in feed over here is so expensive.
Oh my
You can't
goodness, yeah.
almost, you can't make a profit. I think in that sense, if you're really bringing in, and it's going to be something on that sense where it's going to be a small scale. You're either doing it for home or doing it for the family. I mean, that's what I do with our poultry.
Right. Well, and
they're so
yeah,
good.
in Utah, where I live, there are people that try to do grass finished beef. Well, we only grow grass about 4 months out of the year.
Right.
And the rest of the time
It's hay.
dormant,
Yeah.
or it's you're feeding hay or forages, other stuff.
Yeah.
Here you can get tasty grass-fed beef, and I'm probably not at risk of offending somebody here because there's probably not anybody from Utah or Wyoming listening to this podcast. But yeah, everybody has different challenges. Trying to grass feed in a climate in that area of the mainland is not the same as grass finishing here, where, like you said earlier, you have year-round nice grass production. Yeah, it varies some during the seasons, but still there's not those stresses.
Yeah.
And there's not the weather stresses of 20 below zero versus 100-degree heat.
Yeah.
That's all in the same location in Utah. You get that kind of range, and the cattle have to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
Here it's much more temperate, and so you can probably
I was
get
real
better
happy to
grass.
move here. I was like, I didn't move here from Utah, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how I do if you had to go from that extremes, man. It's very, very different. Yeah. So when does this project end?
The project we're working on, and it's grant funded, and it will go till September of 2022.
Okay.
But we've also Shannon, Melly, myself, Mark, we've also applied for some additional funding. And if we get that, it will go on into another year beyond that. And my sabbatical will be done. I'll be back in Utah, but I can still work on this. If the grant goes through, then part of my time will be devoted to that grant. And so, I'm hoping to, over the next couple of years, probably get back to the islands 2 or 3 times. Hopefully COVID will
allow us to be in person.
Have some meetings where I can sit down with some of you. You can, we can work through some decisions. You can tell me what some of your challenges are. I can go back to the office and fix that decision tool to really reflect your needs. That's, that is my goal. It's not to be here and enjoy the beach for a year and be gone. It's to, establish some relationships where, some of you have become my friends. And so I'm trying to help out. And I'll definitely have to be doing more work for Utah producers after the end of this year, but can also still be doing work. And a lot of it's the same. I mean, some of those decision support tools I'm working on for Hawaii cattle producers will be the same for Utah producers in terms of, I'll just change the market that we're looking at. I'll be using a Wyoming or a Utah auction market rather than a Washington state. Or, but the decision points of, okay, here's the price I could get today versus what could I expect 3 months from now? Those are always the decisions we're pretty much making in agriculture with almost, you think about anything, whether you're cattle, your sheep, your dairy, you're a farmer, you're growing something, usually you have to make a decision and you're not going to get paid on that decision for 2, 3, 6 months, sometimes a year. If I make a decision, I'm going to breed more cows. Well, from the time of that decision till I actually sell more cows, that's a quite a ways out in the future. But if there's some things that we can look at to help us not guess, but to take some educated looks at, okay, here are the conditions in the market that generally leads to higher prices. So now would be a good time to build up my cow herd a little bit and have calves to sell in that higher market time frame. Or we've got market conditions that are looking like prices are going to be lower for a little bit. Maybe it's a good year to reduce my cow numbers a little, let my pastures grow back, get very strong. So then the next year I can come in again.
Right.
Those are, again, those are some things that I would love to try to help and model and make it so producers feel like they've got more control than just, I got 10 calves ready to sell. I guess I'll sell them, whatever the broker gives.
Whatever it is. Yeah. It's good. Just be able to understand the risk more for them and make more informed decisions. I think that's very important. Yeah. So, one thing that I always have a trouble understanding is talking about those prices and stuff is just understanding the slide, the weight price and slides and how all that works. You want to talk a little bit about how that works and understanding of how do producers understand what that means for them?
Sure. And this is one of those topics where I'll have to be careful that I don't dig down too deep into the weeds and lose everybody. It's something that if I were standing in front of a whiteboard teaching students, or even if I were at a meeting, I could easily throw out some examples that I think would make sense. But since most of you are just listening, I'll try to talk more in general. But essentially the price slide, it's basically based on the idea that animals are going to be close to the same slaughter weight when they're slaughtered. And they're going to get close to the same price. So then it's going to cost something to get the animal from when you're selling it today to that price. And most of the time, your cost of feed, whether that's grass in Hawaii, whether that's grass in Washington State, whether that's corn stalks in Nebraska, or it's corn grain, another feed in a feedlot, generally that cost of gain per pound is going to be less than the market price. So for every pound that you're adding, you're expected to make a little money, because I'll just use some round numbers. Let's say the price we're going to sell at is $1 per pound, and the cost of feeding is 80 cents per pound. Then every pound I'm putting on, I'm gaining 20 cents. So the buyer, he's figured out in his head, okay, I'm going to need to add 600 pounds to this animal, and I should make 20 cents on every one of those 600 pounds. Therefore, I'm making $120 on that animal. Well, then if you show up to sell me an animal that weighs more than what we agreed to on a price, that means I'm going to have less of that weight to gain and I'll make less money.
Right.
And so that's the rationale. That's one rationale for the slide, is that it's trying to, I bought an animal thinking I was going to feed it this many days.
Right.
And now it's going to be heavier. So I'll have less feed and I won't make as much. The other issue is, again, let's think about the 400-pound calf. And if I'm getting $1 per pound for that calf, it's costing the buyer $400 to buy it. If you deliver me a 450-pound calf, it's costing me $450 to buy it. And if you deliver me a 500-pound calf at the $1, it's costing me $500. Well, I only had so much money. And so as that weight creeps up, and we recognize that, okay, it's hard for everybody to guess the weight of a cattle, the weight of a steer or a heifer. And so we give some range. We say, all right, $1 for a 400-pound animal. If you're more than 25 pounds heavier or more than 50 pounds heavier, you figure that out and you say, if you go over that, rather than paying you $1, I'm going to pay you 95 cents for the first 25 pounds. And if you go 50 pounds, I'm going to pay you 90 cents less. So now let's say that the 400-pound calf cost $1. If we didn't have a slide and you delivered a 450-pound calf, it would be $450. But with the slide, if I backed it to 90 cents, let me see if I can do that math in my head, it'd cost me, I think, roughly $405. So I'm still going to pay a little more for that animal, but not as much.
$450.
Yeah, not $450. So the slide is basically, and it's not advantageous to sellers at all. It's the advantage is always to the buyer on the slide, because I have rarely seen where if you deliver a calf that's light, that they pay you more. The slide usually doesn't go that direction, so if your calf comes in at 375 rather than 400, they don't pay you more. Usually the slide only goes up for the heavier weight, and the slide goes down for the seller. So it's to the seller's advantage, but they are taking your animal, they're taking the risk, and that's kind of where the slide comes in. So if my guess is most of you don't have access to scales on your operations. Maybe some of the bigger producers on the island might have their own scale. If you have a scale, it's always an advantage to kind of be checking that. If not, then you've got to get very good at eyeballing your cattle, and because clearly you don't want to be having very many of your cattle heavy and have to be hit by the slide. If there's a few pounds over, that's fine. That's within the variability. And, that's something that producers can probably, if you feel like you're very good at estimating your weight, maybe that's something you can negotiate with the buyer, is take a fewer cents, be willing to take a heavier price slide in exchange for a higher market price. Because if you're confident that all your cattle are going to come in under the weight, then you could say, look, you can do a 20-cent slide on me if they're over this, but by doing that, will you give me a couple more cents on everything? And again, that's a bargaining and negotiating tactic. I can't guarantee you can get it. But I've learned you never get something you don't ask for.
Exactly.
That's right.
That's right.
The worst they're going to tell you is no, right?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, that makes it. So it's almost more advantageous for them to kind of meet the weight or be a little bit over. I would say, then be under the weight then? Is that kind
Well,
of?
yeah. And if you sell under the weight, then you're basically, you're not getting paid enough.
Yeah.
And that's true. I've done a lot of work on slaughter cattle pricing and some grid markets, and we are still selling weight in the cattle industry. We sell weight at the calf level, feeder level, and the slaughter cattle level. And definitely you always want to kind of push the limit of what that weight is, because selling less weight will always bring you less revenue. And so ultimately, you kind of got to push that limit, but hopefully get pretty good at
but you also don't want to feed them a whole lot especially like, I mean, if you have like real feed efficient calves, that's great, because then you can push it. But I'm just thinking like, I'd have to balance that with feeding them out extra here, just in terms of the cost of feed and stuff. So yeah, I was like, I can see where you want to push it so you get as close to it as you can, just because that's going to be financially advantageous. But if you have really feed efficient calves, then you can definitely do that. And some people here really have like some that are like really efficient with their conversion.
Well, now where I think too, where record keeping comes really important in your calving and breeding seasons, right? Because then you're getting your animals when they're getting bred out, when you're going to be able to get them into market too, right? Because so you just have those rate ranges a little bit closer together within your calving herd as well. So, or, your animals that are coming out. That's why I think when we talk about record keeping, that's very important, I mean, back before, I still know a few producers that don't actually take bulls out, they leave them in there, or they have multiple, calving seasons during the year. So, it can work for you or against you in some sense. It's just depending on where you're taking your animals to. What market.
I think even if you're doing the year-round calving, basically leaving your bulls in, it's still an advantage, and I'm sure all of you are checking your cattle frequently enough. You may not know the day that calf was born, but if there's a new calf on the ground and it wasn't there 3 days ago, well, record that date. And because calves, if your genetics are somewhat consistent and your pastures are consistent, performance tends to be consistent as well. So if you know that, okay, at 180 days, my calves will weigh 400 pounds, or maybe for you, it's 190 days or whatever it is. If you're going to know that, and then you've recorded that information, you can say, okay, it looks like I'm going to have a group of calves in 3 weeks that should be getting close. So I need to be talking to the broker, figuring out when I can get them to him. And this is where I think we want to take it as close to that weight as we can. You don't want to sell them today when you still have 2 or 3 weeks that they can still be grazing,
putting on weight.
So that's good point. Record keeping is key.
That will really help.
Even if it's just on your calendar and you write it somewhere. It's like, as long as it's somewhere you can reference.
It's a matter of getting into the habit of doing the record keeping, whether it's in your phone, on a piece of paper, or little red book, wherever, or something, right? That was the important thing. But thank you, Dillon.
Thank you,
for being here and sharing with us about the program. We do believe we're going to create a survey at some point to be able to collect more data.
Yay.
On those prices for the producers that are.
Be looking out for it in the next, I would say
3 months, maybe.
Yeah.
So
because it is 2022 after all. So
well, anything else you want to share?
I think that's good, and I hope to be back here in the spring again. We're hoping to do some workshops on Hawaii, Maui,
and Kauai.
Maybe in person. That's the dream.
Yep, that's the dream. We hope to be here, and I hope to have some
I hope so too.
Put together, maybe some data from you that I can share. And again, none of it is. I don't want to keep it. It doesn't do me any good. So whatever I collect, I'll try to get back to you. Put up on their websites in terms of the price. Like if I can get enough prices reported, I'll put those prices up so that everybody can see them.
Yeah.
Won't be any secrets. You'll all see what I'm basing the numbers on.
Yeah. That would be good. Yeah.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Thank
Hopefully
you
you'll
so
be able
much.
to have those workshops and share this information again in person. So it'll be really good. Well,
yeah. Thank you so much for coming, Dillon. We are so glad to have had you on our show today. Thank you for taking the time to talk story with us. We hope our listeners gain some insight into your decision support tools and how Hawaii producers can benefit from them.
Yeah, make sure to join our Facebook page, the Livestock Extension Group, if you haven't already, and be sure to visit the UH CTAHR Extension website and our YouTube channel, which will be listed in the show notes.
Yes. For additional information about this topic, see the show notes of the podcast and the description box of our YouTube page. Thanks for listening to the Livestock Walaʻau. And before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast. That's us, by the way, by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you are listening to this. And then stay tuned for next month's episode.
Yeah. Mahalo for listening, everyone. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Ahui ho.
Ahui ho.